talk about what that means to be a shepherd, because I do think it's confusing to people, where a lot of people are kind of going for that CEO model, which we're seeing those kind of crumble a lot. And then you have the celebrity pastor that's got this big online presence where you look at all that's going on, you're like, well, do you actually have time for your local congregation? So how do you approach that as a pastor?
Yeah, it's been very interesting. And a couple of things there. One is, your comment about the writing of the book. It's not dissimilar to how you have to construct a sermon. Obviously, what the theological content has to be biblical. It has to be defensible. It has to be these things. But, one of my mentors says there's a difference between writing a sermon and preaching to people you know and love. And I think in your book, again, that's the audience that you were trying to write to, people who had maybe been on a journey similar to yours, and they needed hope, and they needed to know there was a solid place to stand. So I think a lot of those transferable principles is what I'm always trying to find from Scripture, that move over to modern day application. One of the things that I think is so important, and we were talking about this a few moments ago, is this idea of, we come to the Bible, and naturally our question is, well, what does it mean to me? Like, I need something out of it. I need the real question to ask is, what does it mean, period? And then I figure out what it meant to that original audience, so that I can draw out the principle that does apply to me in the here and now. But we have to dethrone ourselves all the time. And I think the way that, evangelical Christianity, especially in North America, has grown around the celebrity pastor culture, the big platforms, now social media just fuels it all the more, I think leads us to a point where we have to be really careful and humble as pastors to remember that our calling, right, is to the Lord first and foremost. But second of all, it is to be shepherd leaders, servant leaders. Jesus modeled that more than anybody else. In John 13, when he washed the feet of his disciples, he was demonstrating that lowliest of low, kind of moment that he was willing to stoop and do that for his disciples. And so there's nothing to us that we shouldn't be unwilling to do for the sake of the gospel. One of my favorite moments in a Bible study, you talk about these moments, is I had a bunch of senior high guys talking about keeping it real. And I said, give me a modern day equivalent, right, of washing feet, describing what it was like in their culture with the animals on the streets and wearing, sandals and these kind of things. And I love this. They came up with washing out a public toilet with your bare hands.
Oh,
and I thought, disgusting and on point, right? And again, just the point being is that's something that's humbling.
Yeah.
And so I think pastors need to remember that if our King of Kings and Lord of Lords was willing to do that, then we need to be really careful. Do we want more people to hear the gospel? Absolutely. Are there things to learn from very gifted communicators? There are. And I listen to some of them and I glean things, from their ability to teach that's clearly God-given, but at the same time, the importance of the local church, I need to align myself with a pastor or pastor shepherd, who's going to know me and know my family and walk with me through the ups and downs of life. And, the way large churches do that, I mean, it's ironic that I pastor basically a mega church now, but the way that they do that, obviously, is they have faithful teams, they have a faithful structure, and they spend a lot of time being sure that people aren't overlooked. There's an old saying, every small church is trying to grow big, and every big church has to work really hard to stay small.
Yeah.
And so that's where we spend a lot of time trying to be intentional to be sure that people feel known and loved.
Yeah. And I think too, there's a responsibility of the churchgoer as well, because, some people are more introverted, like I'm more introverted, but at the same time, it's like, the responsibility of the churchgoer is also to take advantage of those things, if you think about, well, I can't connect and I can't, but then, you have these Sundays where you're like, we have all these small groups, join a small group, or we have family night, come to the family night. And then, if you're not taking advantage of some of those things, you can get lost in the shuffle, but there's there can be a shared responsibility there.
Absolutely.
Too, I think. So.
Yeah. And, we want everybody to be participants, but that doesn't mean all the participation looks the same.
Yeah.
Some of the healthiest people I know, they serve in ministries that are very behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But that's the way God wired them, and that's their giftedness. Other people are gifted for the platform, but we need each other. And that's one thing I find on a continual basis.
Yeah, that's good.